Stand down, Maddox, they're calling it extortion. My commander's voice hit like a boot. That morning I found her note. She'd chosen happiness with her millionaire boss. By noon, her lawyer waved a refinance addendum I'd signed mid-PCS, my prenup gutted. By dusk, a judge froze my accounts while their PR painted me unhinged, career threatened, cash gone, name trashed. But I kept records like a sniper keeps rounds, and I knew their filings cold. I had one move, the clean kind, that destroyed them both. No threats, no hacks, daylight only. I set it in motion and waited. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. My name is Francis Maddox, and I'm 36 years old. Each morning, I divide my time between Army duties and my small carpentry workshop behind our modest apartment. The sawdust-scented garage has become my sanctuary, especially now with my half-finished oak dining table waiting patiently for my return. My wife, Jenna, a marketing executive, often says I love my uniform more than her, but she doesn't understand that every deployment, every late-night training is my way of keeping my promises. I've always been methodical about keeping records, receipts, emails, conversations, a habit that will prove more valuable than anyone expects. Last night, when my deployment orders arrived, 30 days' notice, Jenna raised her wine glass and smiled. To new beginnings, she said, but somehow the toast felt meant for someone else. Even the strongest walls can crack from the inside. I woke up early like always, my mind already running through the deployment checklist. The house was quiet. Too quiet. No coffee smell, no shower running, no CNN playing in the background. Just silence and a white paper on the kitchen counter that made my stomach drop before I even read it. I've chosen happiness with Gareth. Don't try to contact me. The lawyers will be in touch. I read it 3 times, my hand steady but my chest tightening with each word. Gareth, her millionaire boss. The guy who'd smiled at me during company parties while asking about my little woodworking hobby. The paper crinkled in my grip as 15 years of military discipline fought against the urge to put my fist through the wall. Instead, I pulled out my phone and called Mike Chen, my lawyer. By 09:30, I was sitting in his downtown office, the morning sun hitting the leather chairs while he reviewed our prenup. The adultery clause is solid, Mike said, adjusting his reading glasses. Given the circumstances, your assets should be protected. The house is clearly yours and the savings account can't be touched. I felt the first hint of relief since finding that note. At least I'd had the sense to insist on the prenup when we got married. Good. I want this clean and quick. I've got wheels up in 29 days. That's when Marissa Vance walked into our lives. Jenna's lawyer arrived at 1100 with a stack of papers and a smile that reminded me of range officers before they called fire in the hole. She pulled out a document I barely remembered signing, something about refinancing during my last PCS move. I'd been knee-deep in transfer papers trying to coordinate a cross-country move while Jenna handled the house paperwork. Big mistake. This addendum, Vance said, tapping the paper with one manicured nail, effectively modifies the original prenuptial agreement. The adultery clause was superseded by these new terms. Mike's face told me everything before he even spoke. I'd signed away my protection in fine print, probably between checking my gear list and booking the moving truck, but I wasn't done. Back at home, I dug through my email archives. Jenna had been forwarding me work emails for months, something about keeping me in the loop while I was training. There it all was. Late-night meetings, suspicious expense reports, emails with double meanings. The affair timeline laid out in Outlook folders and calendar invites. This is enough to prove misconduct, I told Mike over the phone. We can use it to negotiate. That's when the hammer really dropped. At 16:47, my phone rang. It was my commander. Maddox, he said, his voice carrying that special tone reserved for soldiers about to get their ass handed to them. I just got off the phone with Jag. Langford's legal team is claiming you're attempting to extort a settlement using private company communications. They're threatening criminal charges. I sat down hard in my workshop chair, sawdust floating in the afternoon light. Sir, Drop it, Francis. That's not a suggestion. You push this. You're risking your career. 20 years of service could go up in smoke. Stand down. The call ended, and I stared at the unfinished oak board on my workbench. I'd been planning to make it into the tabletop centerpiece, but now it just looked like everything else in my life, incomplete and exposed. 15 years of carefully documented emails, texts, and bank statements, and I couldn't use any of it without torpedoing my own career. My fingers traced the grain of the oak. The wood didn't lie. Every mark, every line told its true story. But what truth could I use now that wouldn't cost me everything I'd worked for? The next morning, I woke up before dawn, muscle memory from years of PT still running strong. My phone showed 05 theme as I punched in a number I hadn't called in months. "First Sergeant Reeves," I said when he picked up. "It's Francis Maddox." "Francis." His voice was already alert, like he'd been up for hours. "Been wondering when you'd call." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. That was Reeves, cutting straight through small talk when something was wrong. "Sir, I could use some guidance. Got time for coffee?" "My shop. 0700. He paused. "Bring that deployment checklist of yours." 2 hours later, I pulled up to his workshop on the outskirts of town. The place looked exactly like I remembered. Corrugated metal walls, warm light spilling from the windows, and the ever-present scent of coffee mixing with wood stain. Reeves stood in the doorway, same flannel shirt and work jeans he always wore, watching me with those deep-set eyes that never missed a detail. Inside, he poured 2 cups of coffee from an ancient percolator while I laid out everything that had happened. The note, the prenup trap, the emails I couldn't use. Through it all, he just listened, occasionally nodding, his weathered hands wrapped around his mug. When I finished, he set down his coffee and walked over to his workbench. "You're fighting on their turf, Francis. Corporate lawyers, PR teams, dirty tricks with paperwork, that's their home ground. Time to change the terrain." "How?" I asked. "They've blocked every piece of evidence I have." Reeves picked up a chisel, tested its edge with his thumb. "What's the first rule of reconnaissance?" "Start with what the enemy shows the world," I answered automatically, 15 years of training kicking in. "Exactly." He pointed the chisel at me. "Langford's a CEO. Public company?" "Yeah. Listed about 3 years ago. Then he's got filing requirements, board oversight, vendor contracts, travel records." Reeves started pacing, the way he used to before laying out a mission plan. "All public information if you know where to look, or available through completely legal requests." Something clicked in my mind. Information they can't block because they're legally required to maintain it. "Now you're thinking." He grabbed a legal pad and a pencil. "Let's map it out." For the next 2 hours, we built our battle plan. SEC filings would show executive compensation and perks. Vendor databases could track private jet usage. Board policies would reveal approval thresholds for expenses, the same ones Jenna had been rubber stamping for Langford. "Package it all up," Reeves said, tapping our notes, "and send it to the board and state regulators. No private emails needed, just public records that tell their own story." I felt something I hadn't since finding that note. Hope. Small, but real. They can't claim I'm misusing private information if everything's already public, or legally obtained through proper channels. Reeves refilled our cups. Sometimes the best punch is the one thrown in broad daylight. That evening, back in my garage, I thought about my dad's fishing trips when I was a kid. He never had fancy gear, just the basics. Good line, sharp hooks, and endless patience. "Fish don't care about your equipment," he'd say. "They care about your technique." I opened my laptop and started drafting our report, laying out the framework Reeves and I had built. The cursor blinked steady as corporate filings and travel records began telling their story. These weren't the personal emails I couldn't use. This was public data, hiding in plain sight. My hands moved over the keyboard, remembering Dad's careful knots and precise casts. But these weren't lakefish I was after. These were corporate sharks, used to swimming in deeper, darker waters. At 21:30, I hit send on the first draft to Reeves. We had a foundation now, something solid to build on. Tomorrow we'd start gathering the actual records, filling in the gaps with hard data. I closed the laptop and walked over to my workbench, running my hand along the oak board I still hadn't finished. For the first time in days, I felt steady again. We had a plan. We had legal ground to stand on. Everything looked solid on paper. After another full day of digging through SEC filings and corporate records with Reeves, our whistleblower report was taking shape. The pattern was clear as day once you lined up the dates and dollar amounts. Private jet usage that didn't match calendar entries, expense reports with contradicting locations, approval signatures that violated board policies. "Look at this," I told Reeves over the phone. 3 different vendor contracts all approved on the same day Langford was supposedly in Singapore. Unless he can be in 2 places at once. "Good catch," Reeves said. "Add it to the timeline. Every inconsistency counts." I was halfway through updating our document when my phone buzzed. A text from my bank. "Important notice regarding your accounts." My stomach dropped before I even opened it. The message was cold and official. All accounts frozen by court order, effective immediately. I called the bank, but they just referred me to the court clerk. The clerk directed me to the case filing, an emergency motion from Marissa Vance, Jenna's lawyer, claiming I was financially unstable and a flight risk due to the pending extortion complaint. Just like that, I couldn't access a dime of my own money. Not my savings, not my checking, not even my deployment pay account. The rent was due in 3 days. I had maybe $40 cash in my wallet and a quarter tank of gas. I drove straight to Reeves's workshop, hands tight on the wheel. He took one look at my face and pulled out 2 chairs. "They froze everything," I said, showing him the order. "Every account. I can't even buy groceries, let alone pay rent." Reeves studied the paperwork, his expression unchanging. "Classic pressure move. They're trying to force you to settle before the board sees our evidence." "It's working," I admitted. "I've got nothing left to fight with." He stood up and walked to his office, came back with his wallet. Pulled out $300 bills. "Groceries," he said, holding them out. "And don't argue with me about it. First Sergeant, I can't. You can and you will." He set the money on the workbench between us. "This is exactly what they want, to isolate you, make you feel powerless. But you're not alone in this fight." I stared at the bills, pride warring with necessity. "I'll pay you back." "Damn right you will. Now let's double down on this report. Best way to unfreeze those accounts is to show the judge who's really playing dirty." We spent the next 4 hours refining our evidence package. Around 2100, Reeves made a call to someone he knew on Langford's board, someone who owed him a favor from way back. 20 minutes later, we had a confirmed ethics committee meeting scheduled for next week, 9 days before my deployment. "Remember," Reeves said as I headed out, groceries in the back seat, "they're rushing because they're scared. Strong position doesn't need dirty tricks." Back home, I stared at my deployment calendar, red X's marking off the days like a countdown. 14 left. 2 weeks to either win this fight or ship out knowing I'd lost everything I'd built. My phone pinged again. This time it was a news alert. Tech CEO Gareth Langford announces major charity initiative. The photo showed him and Jenna at some black tie gala, all smiles and champagne. The article quoted him about giving back and corporate responsibility. Below that was another headline: "Board reviews allegations, finds no evidence of wrongdoing." They'd moved faster than we expected, trying to bury our evidence before we could present it. I set the phone down and walked to my workshop. The oak table sat there, still unfinished, like everything else in my life right now. 14 days, empty bank accounts, a PR machine painting me as the bitter, unstable ex while Langford played philanthropist. The pressure was real now. Every hour that passed was another tick in their favor, another day closer to when I'd have to leave, one way or another. The next morning hit like a grenade. My phone was lighting up with notifications before I even got coffee in me. Headlines everywhere, all saying the same thing. Tech visionary Gareth Langford launches $2 million education initiative. There he was, picture perfect in his $1,000 suit, champagne glass raised. And right beside him, Jenna wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly pay. The photos made my stomach turn. Every single shot was calculated. Them greeting city officials, shaking hands with charity directors, Langford signing an oversized check with that practiced smile of his. Each image screamed, upstanding citizen and corporate leader. I scrolled through my feed watching the story spread. Local news picked it up first. then business websites, then social media. Comments started rolling in. So inspiring. And what a power couple. Someone who knew us both from base housing had shared it, adding, "Sometimes people just grow in different directions." That's when I saw the other headline. Board conducts internal review, clears CEO of allegations. They'd moved fast. Too fast for any real investigation. The statement was pure PR speak about thorough examination and maintaining highest standards. But the damage was done. They'd killed our evidence before we could even present it. My phone buzzed. "Reeves, you seeing this?" "Yeah, they got ahead of us. Come by the shop. Bring the settlement papers." I knew which ones he meant. They'd arrived yesterday. Thick envelope, Marissa Vance's law firm letterhead. I hadn't opened it yet, but I knew what it would say. Sign away any claims, keep my mouth shut, get my accounts unfrozen. Walk away with whatever crumbs they felt like leaving me. Reeves's shop was quiet when I arrived. Just the hum of his old coffee maker and morning light streaming through dusty windows. He'd cleared his workbench, left 2 chairs facing each other. I dropped the envelope between us. Sat down. Neither of us spoke for a long minute. Finally, I pulled out my phone, showed him the latest article. Some business blog had dug into my background, painted me as the estranged military spouse trying to tarnish a respected CEO's reputation. They'd even quoted anonymous sources about my concerning behavior after Jenna left. "They're good," I admitted. "Everything they're saying, it's not true, but it sounds true. Makes me look exactly like the bitter ex-husband they want me to be." Reeves just nodded, letting the silence do its work. I opened the envelope, spread out the papers. Standard non-disclosure agreement. Promise not to pursue any claims. No contact with board members or regulators. In exchange, they'd lift the freeze on my accounts, let me access my own damn money again. 13 days, I said. That's all I've got left before Wheels Up. If I don't sign this, I gestured at my phone, at all the headlines painting me as the villain. They've got the media, the board, everything lined up against me. I push this further, I could lose my career. Over what? Pride? Reeves leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, still saying nothing. I picked up the pen they'd helpfully included. Expensive one, probably cost more than I had in my wallet right now. Maybe it's time to cut losses. Live to fight another day. The shop was so quiet I could hear the pen click as I uncapped it. The signature line waited at the bottom of the page, blank and accusing. I thought about Jenna's smile in those gala photos, about Langford's practiced pose with that oversized check, about all those comments calling them inspirational, while I sat here with frozen accounts and a career hanging by a thread. The pen felt heavy in my hand. One signature and it would be over. I could deploy with my career intact, maybe even with enough money to start over somewhere new. It was the smart play, the safe play. I set the pen down. Reeves watched me, face unreadable. "If I sign this," I said slowly, "he wins. Everything, the lies, the manipulation, using my own wife against me, it all just works for him. And he'll do it again to someone else." The pen sat there between us, unsigned papers waiting. 13 days left on the calendar, and a decision that would echo long after I deployed. "Tell me about your father's toolbox," Reeves said suddenly, breaking the silence. The question caught me off guard, but I knew what he was doing. Dad's old Kennedy toolbox sat in my garage, decades of scratches telling its story. Steel, made in '72. Thing weighs more than some cars I've driven. Has this perfect balance, though. When you carry it, the weight just settles right. And what's inside? Everything he needed. Nothing he didn't. I smiled, remembering. He'd say, "Son, fancy tools don't make the craftsman." He could do more with a basic set of wrenches than most guys could with a whole shop full of equipment. Reeves nodded. "So what's in your toolbox right now?" I straightened up, mind clicking into gear. We had emails, sure, but we also had travel records, expense reports, building access logs, all obtained legally. Most importantly, we had the one thing Langford couldn't control: math. "Give me your printer," I said. The next 6 hours were a blur of paper, highlighters, and coffee. We laid everything out on Reeves's workbench. Flight manifests showing Langford's private jet in Miami, while his calendar claimed Denver meetings. Keycard logs placing him and Jenna in the executive suite at midnight. Same nights their expense reports showed client dinners across town. Each contradiction notarized, time-stamped, cross-referenced. "Look at this pattern," I said, pointing to a series of dates. Every time there's a board review coming up, they'd create these fake business trips. Expense reports would show hotels, meals, client meetings, but the jet logs and keycard data tell a different story. "And your wife's signature is on those expense approvals?" I nodded grimly. Every single one. She wasn't just having an affair, she was his shield. If anyone questioned the expenses, it would fall on her. We packaged everything into 3 identical sets, one for Harrison Blake, Langford's lead investor, one for the SEC, one for the State Regulatory Board, each with a cover letter laying out the timeline, the contradictions, and most importantly, proof that the other 2 copies were already in transit. "This is your artillery," Reeves said, watching me seal the last envelope. "Once you fire, there's no calling it back." "I know." I checked my watch. The FedEx pickup was in 20 minutes. But they're not expecting this. They think I'm cornered, about to sign their settlement. They won't see it coming from this direction. "Because you're not attacking Langford directly," Reeves smiled. "You're showing his money people that he made them vulnerable." I grabbed my keys, packages under my arm. Rich guys hate looking stupid even more than they hate losing money. The FedEx store was quiet, just me and a bored-looking clerk. 3 overnight envelopes, 3 tracking numbers. My hands were steady as I filled out the forms, but my heart was hammering. This was it. Everything we'd found, everything we'd proven, launching into orbit. No way to recall it once it left my hands. "Overnight guaranteed by 10:30 a.m.?" the clerk asked. "Yes." I handed over my card, praying it wouldn't be declined. It went through. Last of my emergency cash, but worth it. The clerk tossed the packages into a bin. Just like that. Done. No dramatic music, no thunderclap. Just the quiet click of a trigger being pulled. I drove home slowly, windows down. The night air felt different somehow, like the calm before a storm. Or maybe that was just in my head. My apartment was dark when I got back. I'd been avoiding it lately, spending more time at Reeves's shop or the base. Too many empty spaces where Jenna's things used to be. But tonight, the quiet felt right, like the silence between lightning and thunder. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, playing it through again. The packets would arrive tomorrow morning. Someone would have to sign for them. Someone would have to open them. Someone would have to read them. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Email notification from hrlangfordindustries.com. Subject, urgent, cease and desist. Notice. I let out a long breath. At least I knew the packages would beat whatever this was to their destinations. The thunder was coming. Question was, who would it hit hardest? I waited until 600 to open that HR email. Might as well face whatever fresh hell they'd cooked up with a cup of coffee in my system. The message was exactly what you'd expect from a corporate legal team trying to look tough. Lots of fancy language about unauthorized access and misappropriation of proprietary communications. The gist was simple enough. They were claiming I'd somehow hacked or stolen the emails between Jenna and Langford. Any evidence I had from internal communications would be considered inadmissible, and using it could result in criminal charges. They'd even CC'd my commander just to twist the knife a little deeper. I scrolled through the 5-page attachment, my coffee going cold beside me. The threat was clear. Back off or face consequences. But something felt off about the timing. Why now? Unless... I grabbed my phone and called Reeves. "Already read it," he said before I could speak. "They're running scared." "How do you figure?" "They just killed half our evidence." "Did they?" There was that calm tone he used when he knew something I didn't. What percentage of our package relied on those emails? I thought back to the documents we'd sent. Maybe 20%? Most of it was public records, travel logs, expense reports. Exactly. I could hear him moving around his workshop, probably setting up for the day's projects. "They're not trying to protect the emails, Francis. They're trying to distract you from the rest. Classic misdirection. Make you worry about what you've lost instead of focusing on what you still have. He had a point. The paper trail we'd built wasn't based on stolen messages or private communications. Everything we'd sent to the investor was publicly available or legally obtained. Still, without those emails showing the relationship, will it be enough? I started pacing my kitchen, a habit I'd picked up since this whole mess started. The numbers tell a story, but the emails proved intent. Numbers don't lie, son, and numbers don't need context to smell bad. There was a pause, the sound of a saw starting up. Besides, think about it. If there was nothing to find, would they be trying this hard to make you back down? That stopped my pacing. He was right again. You don't deploy lawyers like missiles unless you're trying to shoot something down. Still, the waiting was killing me. I had 10 days left before deployment, and my apartment looked like a war room. Half-packed duffel bags competed for space with stacks of documents I'd copied for backup. My garage workshop was the only clean space left. I'd needed one place that didn't remind me of legal battles and betrayal. I spent the morning doing equipment checks, triple-checking my deployment checklist. Anything to keep my mind off the ticking clock. Every email notification made my heart jump, but it was just regular Army stuff. Briefing schedules, medical updates, the usual pre-deployment flood of requirements. Around 1600, I hit the gym on base. Nothing clears your head like beating the hell out of a punching bag. I was 3 rounds in when my phone buzzed. A text from Reeves. Need you to swing by the shop first thing tomorrow, 0700. I toweled off and typed back, everything okay? Better than okay. Just be here. Something in his tone, even through text, caught my attention. Reeves wasn't one for drama or build-up. If he was being cryptic, he had his reasons. I tried calling him back, but it went straight to voicemail. That wasn't like him either. He always answered, even if just to say he couldn't talk. The rest of the night crawled by. I cleaned my already clean apartment, reorganized my toolkit, even tried working on some deployment paperwork, but my mind kept circling back to Reeves's message. At 2300, I was still awake, staring at the ceiling when my phone rang. Reeves. Sorry about earlier, he said. Had some meetings that couldn't wait. Meetings? You hate meetings. Sometimes they're worth it. There was something different in his voice, like a poker player holding a royal flush but not ready to show his cards. You get that HR notice sorted in your head? Yeah, I think so. You were right about the misdirection. Good. A pause. Be at my shop at 700, bring coffee. Reeves, what's going on? Tomorrow. He hung up. I lay there in the dark, turning his tone over in my mind. In 15 years, I'd never heard him sound quite like that. Measured, almost satisfied, like a man who'd just watched all his careful plans line up exactly right. I pulled into Reeves's gravel driveway at 0657, 2 cups of strong coffee in the carrier. The morning had that crisp fall bite that always reminded me of basic training, the kind of cold that wakes you up before the caffeine hits. His shop lights were already on, classic rock playing low through his ancient radio. I found him at his workbench, reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied something on his tablet. Right on time, he said without looking up. Set that coffee down and grab a seat. I did, noticing a stack of printouts next to his elbow. Fresh ones by the look of the paper. Remember when you asked me about those meetings yesterday? He took off his glasses, faced me square. Got a call from someone at Maxwell Brothers Investment Group. They're Langford's biggest backer. My throat went dry. And? Their audit team's been working overtime since they got our package. Let's say they're finding some interesting patterns. He picked up the top sheet, handed it to me. Take a look at that approval chain. I scanned the document. It was a spreadsheet showing executive expense authorizations, nothing I hadn't seen before. Then I hit the highlighted sections. Wait. I leaned closer. These are all approved by your wife. Reeves nodded. Every single one. For the past 18 months, she's been the primary sign-off on Langford's discretionary expenses. Private jet usage, resort bookings, entertainment allowances, all of it. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. But she's not even in finance, she's marketing. Exactly. They buried the approvals under her marketing budget authority. Made it look like business development expenses, He tapped another sheet. The real kicker? The dates line up perfectly with when she got that surprise promotion last year. My mind raced back. The promotion had seemed too good to be true. Junior marketing manager to executive level in one jump. She'd said Langford recognized her potential. Now I understood what potential he'd really seen. Son of a bitch. The words came out barely above a whisper. He wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was using her as a human shield, Reeves finished. If anyone questioned the expenses, she'd be the one holding the bag. Her signatures, her department, her approval chain. The betrayal twisted deeper. Not just our marriage, not just her affair. She'd let herself become a puppet in Langford's fraud. Maybe she knew, maybe she didn't. But either way. The investor team's not happy, Reeves continued. This isn't just about affairs or office politics anymore. We're talking serious financial misconduct, the kind that makes shareholders nervous and regulators curious. I stood up, needed to move. Paced the length of his workbench while my mind sorted through implications. That's why they tried so hard to shut me down. The emails, the PR campaign, all of it, they weren't just covering up an affair. They were covering up a paper trail. Reeves sipped his coffee. And now that trail's leading straight to some very uncomfortable questions. I stopped at his tool wall, stared at the precise rows of wrenches and chisels. Everything in its place organized for maximum efficiency. Just like I'd thought my life was. Does she even realize what he set her up for? Reeves shook his head. Hard to say, but either way, she's in it deep now. My phone buzzed. Another PR hit piece about me had just dropped. Local business journal this time, painting me as a desperate ex-husband trying to smear a respected community leader. The timing wasn't accidental. They're getting nervous, Reeves observed. Playing the same cards harder because they're running out of options. I barely heard him. My email had just refreshed, showing a new message from the State Regulatory Commission. Official letterhead. My hands weren't quite steady as I reached for my phone. Francis. Reeves's voice cut through my focus. Whatever's in that email, remember, we built this right. Clean evidence, legal channels, proper procedures. Let it work. I looked at the unopened message, cursor blinking. 7 days until deployment. Everything we'd built was about to either pay off or collapse. I opened the email. The state regulator's letter glowed on my phone screen. I read it twice, 3 times, making sure each word was real. They're opening a formal investigation, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Full probe into Langford's executive compensation and expense reporting practices going back 3 years. Reeves leaned back in his chair, a ghost of satisfaction crossing his weathered face. Read me the key parts. I cleared my throat. Based on documentation provided through appropriate channels, our office has identified sufficient cause to initiate a comprehensive review. Then there's a lot of legal language. But here's the meat. Given the nature of the preliminary findings, we are immediately notifying all relevant parties, including the SEC and corporate board. Keep going. Additionally, I continued, we are instructing all related courts that the basis for emergency financial orders against Francis Maddox has been invalidated. They're copying this to the family court judge. My throat tightened. The freeze on my accounts is history, Reeves finished. And that prenup you were smart enough to get? I scrolled further. Back in full force. The refinance addendum is getting tossed. They're citing something about materially incomplete disclosure of conflicts. I set the phone down, feeling lightheaded. First Sergeant, we actually did it. Part of it, he corrected, but his eyes were bright. The legal angle's locked. Your money's safe, your career's clear, and that prenup you fought for is solid. But Langford's still got his PR machine. I nodded, remembering the latest hit piece. He's trying to control the narrative, because it's all he's got left. Reeves stood, walked to his planning board where we'd mapped everything out. Right now he's hoping to weather this investigation behind closed doors. Handle it quiet, maybe pay some fines, spin it as a misunderstanding. The thought of Langford slipping away with just a financial slap made my jaw clench. Not good enough. Agreed. Reeves erased a few notes, started writing new ones. So how do we make sure the reputation hit sticks? I joined him at the board, studying our timeline. The answer was there, in the pattern we'd followed all along. Same way we won the legal fight. Clean. Professional, by the book. Go on. The regulators have to make their findings public, I said, thoughts crystallizing. That's law, but timing matters. If Langford knows it's coming, he'll pre-spin it. Reeves nodded. Try to soften the blow. I grabbed a marker, started sketching out the sequence. So we make sure the investor group moves first. They're not bound by the same disclosure rules. If they act on what they know, before the regulatory announcement hits, Reeves picked up my thread. Langford loses control of the story completely. The plan flowed onto the board, clean, logical steps, just like building a proper table. Measure twice, cut once, every joint and angle true. I thought of my workshop at home, that half-finished oak piece waiting. For the first time in weeks, I could actually picture completing it. One chair, my chair, earned, not begged for. Speaking of the investors, Reeves said, they should have finished their initial review by now. Might be worth. His phone buzzed. He checked it, eyebrows lifting slightly. Well? I asked. Contact at Maxwell Brothers, he said, reading. Just 2 lines. Decision's been made. It's big. I felt my pulse kick up. What kind of big? But Reeves was already typing a response, that familiar focused look on his face. The one that said pieces were about to move faster than expected. Note. Stopped here as we've covered all elements from the prompt. Regulatory probe confirmed, accounts unfrozen, prenup reinstated, discussion of reputation strategy, workshop table metaphor, and ending exactly on Reeves receiving the investor text about a big decision. 2 hours later, I sat across from Reeves at Mel's Diner, 3 blocks from Maxwell Brothers Investments' glass and steel headquarters. The place was pure 1950s nostalgia. Chrome trim, vinyl booths, and coffee that could strip paint. Perfect for conversations that needed to stay quiet. Here's how it went down, Reeves said, sliding a fresh mug my way. Maxwell's board met this morning. Emergency session, closed door. They reviewed everything we sent, plus what their own audit team dug up. I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic, remembering similar briefings in dusty command posts. And? They're pulling everything. All funding, effective immediately. Reeves took a measured sip. Langford's out. Not stepping down to pursue other opportunities. Not taking a leave of absence. Removed. Today. The words hit me like a physical wave. I sat back, feeling the vinyl creak under my weight. Around us, the lunch crowd chattered about ordinary things. Weekend plans, kids' soccer games, weather forecasts. But right here, in our worn booth, a millionaire's empire was crumbling. How solid is this, I asked, soldier's instinct checking for weak points. Maxwell Brothers controls 60% of operating capital, Reeves said. When they pull out, the other investors will follow. It's not just about the money, it's the signal it sends. Nobody wants to be the last one holding toxic stock. I nodded slowly, processing. And my wife? Named in the audit findings. Fired for cause. His eyes held mine. They're not protecting her. Langford made sure she signed everything, made her his shield. Now she's part of the public record. That hit differently than I expected. Not satisfaction exactly. More like confirmation of something I'd already grieved and buried. You okay? Reeves asked. Yeah. I meant it. Just processing how complete this is. A month ago, they had me backed into a corner. Frozen accounts, career threatened, reputation under attack. Now they're the ones losing everything. Reeves finished his coffee. That's how it goes sometimes. You build things right, clean, by the book, and gravity does the rest. The diner's bell chimed as new customers walked in. I glanced at my watch, 1:47 p.m. Somewhere in a corporate boardroom, papers were being signed. Lawyers were drafting statements. PR teams were scrambling. When does this hit the news, I asked. Soon. Maxwell has to file disclosure forms by end of business. Once those go public, Reeves shrugged. Every financial outlet in the country will run with it. I pulled out my wallet, dropped enough cash to cover both coffees plus a solid tip. Think I'll drive home, turn on the business station. Reeves nodded, understanding. Want company? Thanks. But no. I managed a small smile. Think I need to hear this one on my own. The drive home was surreal. Traffic moved normally. People walked their dogs. Construction crews worked on the highway expansion. Nothing looked different, but everything was. I turned on the radio, found the business news channel. They were covering tech stocks, something about semiconductor shortages. I kept driving, windows down, letting the October air clear my head. 3 traffic lights from my apartment. The newsreader's tone changed. We're getting breaking news from our financial desk. Stand by. I pulled into my complex's lot, killed the engine but left the radio running. Waited. The anchor's voice came back, crisp and professional. In a stunning development. The anchor's voice filled my car. In a stunning development, Maxwell Brothers Investment has announced an immediate withdrawal from Langford Enterprises following allegations of financial misconduct. CEO Gareth Langford has been removed from his position effective immediately. I sat there, engine cooling, as the story unfolded in crisp radio speak. Markets responding, stock prices plummeting, emergency board meetings. Then came the part that made my throat tight. Audit findings indicate systematic misuse of corporate funds with multiple executives implicated. Among those terminated was Marketing Director Jenna Carver-Maddox, whose sources say approved irregular expense reports and travel arrangements. My phone started buzzing. First just notifications, then actual calls. I switched it to silent, needing space to process. This wasn't like winning a firefight or completing a mission. It was quieter, heavier. Remember those old westerns where the dust settles after a shootout? That's what this felt like. No triumph music, no crowd cheering, just truth finally getting its day in court. The stories kept breaking all afternoon. I watched them roll across my laptop while sitting at my kitchen counter. Business journals, local news, social media, each one adding new details. Photos of Langford leaving the building, screenshots of deleted LinkedIn profiles. Corporate statements full of phrases like pursuing legal options and cooperating fully with investigators. Around 4, the texts started. People who'd seen the news, finally connecting dots. Some were awkward apologies from mutual friends who'd bought Langford's PR spin. Others expressed shock, asking if I'd known all along. A few just sent links to articles like I might have somehow missed my own vindication. I answered none of them. The sun was setting when Reeves called. You watching this unfold? Yeah. I moved to the window looking at the orange sky. Feels strange? Strange how? Like, I searched for words. Like finding your wallet after thinking it was stolen, but all the cash is still there. Relief mixed with something else. Justice, Reeves said simply. That's what it feels like when it's done right. Clean. Complete. We let that sit for a moment. Through the phone I heard the familiar sounds of his workshop, tools being arranged, wood being sorted. You know what you need to do now? He asked. I smiled slightly. Finish the table. Damn right. Get your hands busy. Build something solid. He was right. I'd started that oak dining table before any of this happened. Before the note, before the lawyers, before everything crashed and rebuilt itself. It had waited patiently through it all, like it knew its time would come. My workshop smelled like sawdust and machine oil. Honest smells that hadn't changed since I was a kid learning in my dad's garage. The oak board lay where I'd left it, grain catching the workshop lights. I ran my hand along its edge, feeling the stories in the wood. Every ring was a year of growth, of standing strong through storms. The first clamp went on smooth and sure. I was adjusting the pressure, getting ready to set the second, when my phone buzzed again. Unknown number, nearly sent it to voicemail. Something made me answer. Francis. Langford's voice, but different now. No boardroom confidence, no practiced charm. Just a man who'd lost everything trying to sound controlled. I think we should talk. We should meet, Langford continued, his voice carrying none of its usual authority. Talk this through like men, face to face. There are things you don't understand. I watched the sawdust settling on my workbench, thinking of all the times I'd imagined confronting him. Now that moment was here, and I felt nothing but tired clarity. No, I said simply. There's nothing to discuss. Listen, Francis. His tone shifted, that practiced smoothness creeping back in. This whole situation, it's been blown out of proportion. The board overreacted. My CFO made some questionable calls and certain people took advantage. Certain people? I cut in. You mean my wife? The one you used as your rubber stamp while you were sleeping with her? The line went quiet for a moment. I could almost hear him recalibrating, trying to find the right angle. These things are complicated. He started again. Business relationships, personal relationships, lines blur. But I never intended... Goodbye, Gareth. I ended the call, blocked the number, and turned back to my work. The oak was waiting. I'd rough-sanded it days ago, before everything exploded. But now it needed the fine touch. Started with 120 grit, working my way methodically across the surface. The rhythmic motion brought back memories of learning this craft. My dad teaching me to always sand with the grain, never against it. Wood has a memory, he'd say. Treat it right, it'll last forever. Each pass of the paper felt like clearing away another layer of the past months. The betrayal, the legal fights, the frozen accounts. All of it coming off like old varnish. My shoulders slowly unknotted as I moved to 180 grit, then 220. The wood grew smoother under my hands, its natural warmth emerging. Around midnight, I finally stopped. My workshop lights cast long shadows across the floor, and the silence in the apartment above felt different now. Not the hollow quiet of abandonment, but something cleaner, lighter, the kind of quiet that lets you hear yourself think. I swept up, ordered my tools the way I always did. The military teaches you that discipline isn't just for the big moments. It's in the small habits, the daily rituals that keep you centered. Tonight, those familiar motions felt like coming home. Morning came with that special clarity you get after good work. The sun was barely up when I mixed the first coat of finish. You can't rush this part. The wood tells you when it's ready. I worked slowly, brush strokes even and deliberate, watching the grain come alive under the satin sheen. The door creaked around 8. Reeves, right on time, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one without a word, then stood back to study the table. Danish oil? He asked after a minute. I nodded. 3 coats should do it. Good choice. He sipped his coffee. Brings out the character. We let the quiet hold for a while, just 2 craftsmen appreciating good work. The morning light caught the finish, making the oak glow like honey. Langford called last night, I said finally. Reeves raised an eyebrow. And? Wanted to meet. Talk it out man to man. I ran my hand along the table's edge. I declined. Course you did. He set his cup down. Some conversations aren't worth having. The finish was drying exactly right, rich and even. Every knot and grain line told its own story. The tough years, the good years, all of it there in the wood. You know what I love about oak? Reeves said, touching a corner. It doesn't try to be anything else. No fancy burls, no exotic colors, just honest strength right there in plain sight. I stepped back, taking in the whole piece. The proportions were perfect, each joint tight and true. 2 more coats and it would be ready. Not just a table, but a testament to patience, to doing things right even when everything else goes wrong. 3 days later, I carried the finished table up from my workshop. Each step was measured, deliberate, just like every move that had brought me to this moment. The oak felt warm under my hands, alive with possibility. My dining room had been empty since she left, just a hollow space marking what was gone. But as I set the table down, centered it perfectly, something shifted. The morning light caught the Danish oil finish, making the wood glow like it was lit from within. Every grain line told its story. The tough years that made it strong, the careful work that brought out its beauty. I pulled out my phone, checking the news alerts that had become part of my morning routine. The headlines didn't disappoint. Langford Enterprises under federal investigation. The regulators had moved fast once they had the full picture. His carefully constructed empire was crumbling brick by brick, each revelation worse than the last. The stock had tanked, investors were fleeing, and his golden reputation had tarnished beyond repair. Another alert popped up. Industry news this time. Jenna's name jumped out at me. Former marketing executive blacklisted amid fraud scandal. She'd been trying to distance herself from Langford, spin her role as unwitting involvement, but the paper trail we'd uncovered was too clear. No major firm would touch her now. The same ambition that made her betray everything had finally turned back on itself. I set my phone down on the table's smooth surface, watching how the wood seemed to absorb its reflection. Strange how victory could feel so quiet. No fireworks, no dramatic confrontations, just the steady satisfaction of justice working exactly as it should. The doorbell rang at 6, right on schedule. Reeves stood there with a bottle of bourbon and that knowing look in his eyes. "Table's done?" he asked, though he could see it behind me. "Come see for yourself." He walked around it slowly, taking in every detail. His weathered hand traced a joint, tested an edge. "Clean work," he said finally. "Real clean." I'd set out 2 plates. Nothing fancy, just some grilled chicken and vegetables I'd prepped earlier. We sat down, the chairs sliding smooth against the hardwood floor. First meal at my new table in a space that finally felt completely mine. Reeves poured us each 2 fingers of bourbon, held his glass up to the light. "To justice," he said simply. "To patience," I added, and we drank. The food tasted better somehow, sitting at something I'd built with my own hands. We talked about small things, workshop projects, base gossip, his granddaughter's first steps. Normal life, the kind that keeps flowing no matter what storms pass through. Between bites, I found myself running my hand over the grain, feeling the subtle variations under my palm. Each pass reminded me of the journey, the betrayal that could have broken me, the strategy that saved me, the discipline that saw me through. My whole life rebuilt, just like this table, piece by careful piece. Reeves watched me, understanding in his eyes. He'd been there for every step, steady as the oak we sat at. I looked up, feeling the ghost of a smile tug at my mouth. The words came naturally, summing up everything I'd learned. "Strength isn't loud," I said. "It's disciplined, patient, and precise." Reeves nodded, raised his glass again. "Damn right it is, son. Damn right it is. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for."